Thank you for staying with us. The environment is the life supporting system for human existence, which provides much of the physical milieu and the raw materials required for socio-economic progress. However, human interaction, natural disaster and climate change are putting unprecedented pressure and impact on the quality of our environment. In Nigeria, one of President Bola Tinubu's renewed hope agenda is to implement policies that will cater to the environmental needs of the country, one of which is the creation of the Committee on Climate Action and Green Economic Solutions to coordinate and oversee all policies on climate action and green economic development. The introduction of compressed natural gas buses is also in a bid to protect the environment from pollution. All this and more is to remove the constraints and coordination, foster a wholesome government approach to climate action programs, provide an efficient governance architecture, and also ensure that all relevant institutions in the sector are plugged into the President's vision and are collectively implementing the renewed hope agenda on climate action. Well, joining us from our Abuja studio to discuss more on this is the Honorable Minister of State, Federal Ministry of Environment, Honorable Dr. Iziaq Salako. Good morning. Thank you for joining us on TVC Breakfast.
Good morning, and thank you for having me. Good morning, Nigerians.
All right. One would acknowledge that the atmosphere is quite tense, and perhaps this will be a great time to talk about some of the positives in the policies that have been made by this administration. So let's begin with you talking to us about major developments in the environment with major emphasis on climate change.
Once again, thank you very much for having me. The focus of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu in the environment sector is grounded on his promises that was made during his campaign as contained in the Renew Hope agenda. When you look at that document, you will see that because of the central nature of the environment sector, environment had a cross-cutting placement. So you find that in that document, issues of environment were being mentioned in several sectors, including in agriculture, in physical policy, in oil and gas, in energy, in foreign policy, in national security, and so on and so forth. Arising from that Renew Hope agenda, I'm sure you know that the President also came forward with 8 presidential priorities. Out of those 8 presidential priorities, 6 of them are also related to the environment sector. So, using the Renew Hope agenda document and the presidential priorities as concerns the environmental sector, the Ministry of Environment, Federal Ministry of Environment, in the last 1 year since the cabinet was formed, has been working with those 2 documents. So you also see that the environment sector does more of soft things rather than hard things because of the fact that, one, the issue of environment requires a lot of policy and regulation frameworks. So in the last 1.5 years, or 1 year or thereabouts, you will see that we have come up with quite a number of policies. I can count up to 6-7 policies that we have come up with, which are to drive actions around climate change issues. As an example, we have developed a national clean cook policy. The national clean cooking policy is an action that's going to help us to reduce emissions from domestic cooking, to reduce the level of deforestation being witnessed from domestic cooking, to also reduce the harmful effects that people suffer from using fossil fuel or biologically based cooking sources like firewood, like charcoal. So that has been developed, and action is ongoing in the implementation of that. Again, we have developed a national circular economic framework. That national circular economic framework is going to help us to manage our waste in a circular format such that we can also use it to generate a lot of opportunities for employment. We can use it to generate a lot of resources for people by creating avenues for the use of such waste for other things. So through that circular economic framework, a national system is being created that is going to help us to ensure that our streets are not only kept clean, our markets are not only kept clean, our drains are devoid of waste, but we can also use those wastes for economic purposes. Within that sector too, it also focuses on agricultural waste and also on the energy sector. That's another policy. So we have done that in several areas, and like I said, about 6 or 7 policies around issues that will drive action, climate action, environmental issues are being drawn up. We're doing a national framework for mitigation and response to flood and other natural disasters, which is going, we are looking at it on a national scale using a committee headed by a governor within the ambit of the National Economic Council. So those are policy issues, which I'll call the soft aspect of our agenda. Then if we now come to the hard aspects, you will see us implementing high impact projects to ensure that the level of flooding that is being witnessed in our country is reduced. Across the country, we have implemented not less than 24 high-impact flood control projects. We are implementing projects within the Niger Delta, particularly within Ogoni, which is contributing largely for the peace that we are witnessing today in the Niger Delta region. You will see that in the last 1 year, the restiveness that we used to know the Niger Delta for has not been there because of some of the things that we're doing through one of our agencies, the Hydrocarbon Remediation Project, HYPREP. We're implementing potable water projects that is going to serve the entire Ogoni community. We're implementing power projects. Today, we're implementing one of the biggest projects in the Niger Delta in Rivers State, which is going to be a center of excellence for remediation.
All right, Mr.
So
Salako,
you see that the environment sector is contributing to national security in that respect.
Yes, but
we're implementing projects.
Mr. Salako, if you can hear me, you've reeled out a lot of things that the federal government is doing to all of these policies. And many people on the ground will say the impact has not been felt so far. So in all of this that you are mentioning, how do we measure its impact in the society?
Well, thank you very much. I didn't get the early part of your question, but I think that what you are asking is that how do we measure the impact of our projects, of what we are doing on the society?
Rolled out so far. How can we measure? Because if you go on the streets, a lot of people do not even understand some of the policies of the government. So how do we measure the impact of all of this?
Let me take a typical example. What we're doing in Ogoni land through HYPREP. Like I said,
We can hear you. We
Hello?
can hear you.
We can hear you.
Go ahead.
We can hear you.
Thank you very much. All right. So I said, let me take a typical example. What we are doing in Ogoni land through HyPrep. You will see that because of the targeted projects of HyPrep that is focusing on the 4 local governments of Ogoni land, you will see that there is less restiveness in that area of our country because government is addressing the felt needs of the people of those areas. For example, we are implementing a comprehensive medical system that is going to address issues that usually arise, health issues that usually arise as a result of pollution. So that is addressing a felt need. We are providing potable water. We are providing even training, vocational training for an empowerment for youth. So if you go to Ogoni land, for example, as an example, you will see that the impact of the federal government is being felt in that area of our country, as a specific example. If you talk about, as an example, the issue of renewable energy that we're promoting, you also see that if you look at our landscape today, people are more aware of the benefit of renewable energy. People are more ready to adopt it, though the cost at the moment may be high, but gradually, if you compare our situation today, as an example for what it was 1 year ago, with respect to the adoption of renewable energy in some of our operations, you will see that there is an increase. If you go to, for example, Kuje Prison in Abuja here today, you see that we have instituted a system whereby the waste being generated, the human waste being generated in that correctional center is being used for energy. It's also being implemented in one of our schools in Kaduna State. So you need actually to go to the people, to go to the communities to see some of those impacts. That because, like I said, most of the things that is done within the environmental sector are soft issues. It's not about building structures. It is different from building roads, of constructing buildings. You need to go to the people to be able to feel the impact of some of these policies and some of these initiatives that are being
Honorable Minister, some would argue, I'm hoping you can hear me, some would argue that to an extent in this part of the world, we have less awareness on individual responsibility in keeping the environment. Not many persons still, have the full knowledge of how to convert their waste to something very meaningful, and also the proper use of drainages, sewages, and proper waste disposal. Very recently, we had the flooding situation, not just in Lagos, but in other parts of the country, which to an extent was attributed to poor waste management. So how much have we grown as regards, awareness in ensuring that people understand their individual responsibility in maintaining a clean environment and its impact on their health?
Yeah, absolutely. I agree with you that the challenge around the environment sometimes or is largely driven by ignorance and lack of individual climate actions, environmental stewardship, environmental citizenship. You see that quite a number of our people may not be doing what is required of them. And that's why I said that the responsibility of the Federal Ministry of Environment as its agencies falls mostly within the ambit of producing policies, regulating, enforcement to ensure that people do what they should do. Our environment, for it to be optimal, requires a lot of mass action. It requires action from you and I. And I also agree with you that creating awareness is of focal importance to ensuring that people take action within their limited areas. So you will see that we are engaging the media more to ensure that people are well informed.
All right. Minister, we hear you very clearly. Yeah, let's quickly go on a quick break. We'll be right back for this conversation. Stay with us.
There has been an increasing trend of cholera cases across the country. Cholera is a highly infectious disease which spread through contaminated water, food, or direct contact with an infected person's feces.
Thank you for staying with us on TVC Breakfast. Right before the break, we were speaking with the Honorable Minister of State, Federal Ministry of Environment, Honorable Dr. Iziaq Salako is live in our Abuja studio, talking to us about the major strides in the policies of President Bola Tinubu's administration, with more emphasis on the environment. Honorable Minister, thank you for staying with us.
In keeping our environment clean, in planting trees, in clearing our drains, and so on and so forth, we cannot have the optimal effect of our policies and regulations that we make here in Abuja. So it is a priority to us to ensure that we continuously engage. And that is why, for example, I'm here today to use this your medium to also further engage Nigerians on creating the level of awareness that is desired.
All right. So you mentioned that you're planning on using the media as you're doing right now, use cartoons, use road shows and all of that. You also have plans to, excuse me, you also have plans to go to educational institutions, nursery, primary schools, talk to students, give teachers this orientation about the environment with the aim to ensure that the policies of government goes down to the grassroots.
Yes, absolutely. You see that quite a number of our programs that we have been holding in Abuja, for example, where we had the World Environmental Day celebration, you see a lot of students participating. You see that quite a number of tree planting that we've been doing. We go to schools to plant those trees. And this is all geared towards mobilizing students. Now we have what we call the Green Action Clubs in some of our schools to organize students, particularly at the secondary school level, to be able to take environmental action, to be able to get more information on environmental issues. We're also organizing and engaging even university students. About a month or so ago, I was in UNILAG in representative capacity to participate in some of the environmental action that the University of Lagos was taking in terms of doing recycling, in terms of ensuring the environment is greener. So we believe very seriously that the younger elements and taking it from schools are very critical to promoting environmental action, to promoting awareness, and ensuring that our environment is kept better.
Let's also talk about the implication of not, having a clean environment on health, basically. Earlier, you mentioned, where you were quoted to have said that Nigeria's Environment Ministry will no longer tolerate IOCs that do not practice transparency and accountability. We know that Nigeria is the second largest producer of oil in Africa and the sixth largest in OPEC. So, and you also mentioned that as of today, Nigeria remains one of the top 10 countries that is in terms of gas flaring volume. So basically, let's talk about how this impacts on health and what's the latest with the IOCs as regards ensuring that they account for the volumes of gas flaring in their companies.
Well, thank you very much. That's a very good question. One of the key drivers of greenhouse gas emission in Nigeria is the flaring of gas from production of fuel, of crude oil. And you recall that when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu attended the Conference of Parties, 28th Conference of Parties to the UNFCCC in Dubai last year, he did make a proclamation that we're now going to adopt a policy of penalty to address the issue of gas flaring in Nigeria. As a result of that, we have now instituted a quarterly engagement with operators within the oil and gas sector. That quarterly engagement is to track and audit the level of gas flaring that they're doing. And we can use that gradually to see how we're transiting from ending gas flaring in Nigeria within a target date of as soon as possible, but not later than 2030. So we've had the first session of that engagement, I think in June this year, and we're hoping to have another one in August, later in the year, you know. And we have also developed a technology that we call the gas flare tracker. That gas flare tracker is resident with one of our agencies, the National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, NOSRIA. And using the technology of the gas oil tracker, we can actually track how much gas each operator within the oil and gas sector is flaring. We can quantify it in terms of costs. We can quantify it in terms of emission. And we can quantify it in terms of potential for energy generation. So we have therefore introduced penalties. So by the time we monitor the level of gas flaring in an IOC, and we can independently on our own quantify how much gas they are flaring and the cost implication of that, we have introduced penalties to ensure that we discourage operators from flaring gas. But this is going to take a process because there are a lot of other supports that is required before we can end gas flaring in Nigeria, routine gas flaring in Nigeria. Infrastructure needs to be provided, funding needs to be provided, and so on and so forth. So this is one area that we are pushing very hard, and I think that with the engagement that we are having with all operators in the oil and gas sector, I am optimistic that we will achieve flaming out gas flaring from routine operations in Nigeria before 2030.
All right, so let's also talk about the presidential CNG initiative, which was launched recently, about 100 billion naira presidential CNG initiative, which came following the withdrawal of fuel subsidy. And of course, it's to reduce the cost of transportation. How impactful will this be, looking at the fact that many people have not yet understood this initiative, the need to go for cleaner energy rather than fuel? What plans do the federal government have to ensure that this initiative goes down the grassroots such that it will be cheaper for a lot of people to install and use?
Thank you very much. There's a special presidential committee that is working specifically on how to ensure that the scaling up of CNG within our operations, transport operations, and other operations that requires energy in Nigeria. And you see that the federal government, as a body, has adopted the policy within the MDAs to ensure that vehicles procured by agencies of government are CNG powered. The fact of the matter is that when you introduce such new policies, it takes time to become grounded. Because first, you need infrastructure that's going to support it. That infrastructure is not going to be provided in one day and cannot be provided by government alone. The policy of government is expected to drive investments into CNG. And you see that today, a number of filling stations are already providing CNG facilities where you can go take your vehicles and get CNG refill. So a lot of filling stations are already doing that, and I think only recently the committee in charge of it rolled out the names and locations of those filling stations where you can do that. Apart from that filling infrastructure, you also need infrastructure for changing your car from being petrol-driven to CNG-driven. That cost is also a lot, and government has provided some level of subsidy to ensure that especially vehicles that are involved in commercial activities are supported by government to go CNG. So you
what about
see
those
that
who are
gradually
Salako, what about for those? What are the plans for those who have private vehicles? Because the public vehicles might not take advantage of this, maybe for some reason of information and all whatnot. What about those who own private vehicles? Are there plans to subsidize the costs?
Well, I cannot speak authoritatively on that. I guess that the committee that is in charge of that will be able to speak authoritatively on that. But what I can tell you is that from my own experience, if you take the pain to invest in CNG conversion of your vehicle, you will ultimately reap the gains, because you find out that over about 6 months period, you will recover almost entirely the costs of that conversion and begin to spend much less, about 40 to 60% less in the cost of energy that is required by your vehicle. So I believe that beyond waiting for government support, it is an area that individuals must also look at and see how they can also privately finance, because in the end, it is going to be of immense benefit in ensuring that people are able to save costs in their energy utilization.
Minister, I want to know perhaps if you have also explored that alternative as regards, converting your own personal vehicle to the use of CNG.
Well, let me confess that I am in the process. It has not been done, but I'm in the process of converting not just my private, one of my official vehicles into CNG, and that process is ongoing.
Okay, if we're in the process now, if one has to convert, sorry, I know it's not within your purview, but how long does it take to convert one vehicle from fuel usage to gas usage, to CNG usage?
I'm afraid I don't know. My challenge really is finding time to be able to do it.
We understand.
The technical persons may be able to tell you in terms of what is the process involved, how long does it take, I don't know.
Okay, so very quickly, I'm quite interested in the Green School project, which is bringing awareness as regards taking care of the environment, the use of renewable energy, proper waste disposal, taking it to school environment to educate these students. And we know that, educating these children is also protecting our future. So can you just, give us an outline of what the plan is like? What are the major areas that will be focused on if this initiative is yet to start?
First, let me also talk again about the use of renewables. Before I go to how we're carrying our children, our young ones along and including them in our agenda. You will find out that renewables, particularly solar, which we have in large quantity in most parts of Nigeria, solar energy is a significantly cost-saving source of energy. And I can cite myself as an example. In my house here in Abuja, I do not have a petrol generator. And apart from energy from the national grid, I only use solar as the backup. And what I found out is that it has saved me significantly a lot of costs. As a matter of fact, sometimes even when we have energy from national grid, in order to save costs of energy, I switched to solar. And because of that, in the last 1 year, I've not bought 1 penny of diesel to power generator. I've not have to invite any technician to come and service a generator. So you will see that cumulatively, over 1 year, I have had one of my aides to be keeping the records. Cumulatively over 1 year, I think that if I look at that record, I'll probably have recovered all the costs that I spent in doing the renewable energy. So you will see that if you are able to take the pain and invest in renewable energy, it is ultimately beneficial, first to your pockets, and then eventually to the environment. So,
Honorable Minister, how do
the issue of carrying our children...
No, continue, go on.
On the issue of how well we are involving the young ones, our children, like I said, most of the actions that we're doing in terms of tree planting, in terms of awareness creation, in terms of organizing quiz competition on environment issues, are being done in schools. I'm sure you know that when we did the World Environmental Day, apart from inviting students of schools for quiz competition, where the winners were given cash prizes and support to plant trees, we also visited some schools to plant trees. We donated tree seedlings for some schools. Earlier on in the year, I was in Port Harcourt. I visited a secondary school where I also met with the Green Action Club, where I planted trees. I donated seedlings for planting trees and also materials for maintaining the trees. Sometimes ago, I was in Ayetoro in Ogun State, in my town, where I established a kind of orchard within a secondary school, where I planted trees there and also supported the school in the maintenance of those trees. So we are engaging the young ones because we strongly believe that without the young ones being involved in some of these things, we will not have the optimal result that we desire. And in the coming days, we're going to be introducing a TV show that is going to be largely involving youth coming to do a kind of TV show to promote environmental action and also increase the awareness of our young people.
All right, Honorable Minister, I want to take you up on the issue you talked about earlier regarding solar power and all of that. But we all know that in as much as, permit me to say, you have the wherewithal to install, to have your house fully solar powered, many Nigerians do not even have that capacity to even install a 1.5 kVA solar inverter or something like that for renewable energy. What can be done to ensure this is easier and cheaper for Nigerians to adopt?
Yes, I agree with you that quite a number of Nigerians may not have the personal resources to be able to do it. But I also must tell you that a number of Nigerians can afford it. But out of lack of awareness and maybe not prioritizing it, they are not doing it. You know, for me as an example, when I did it, it's a matter of priority. You know, the fund I expended in doing the solar system, I could have used it to buy a generator. You know, but because I prioritized renewable over non-renewable, I decided to take that fund to do renewable. So I think that it's also important that we prioritize it in our spending. So when we put it as a priority, you see that quite a number of us may also be able to do it independent of support from government. As to how we can support people, one of the key suggestions that we have made to people that have approached us, especially private companies that have approached us for support in terms of scaling up their renewable energy infrastructure, is to also suggest collaboration with us and creating a system where we can do some consumer crediting to support acquisition of renewable sources of energy. And I think that with the policy of Mr. President and the initiative of Mr. President to promote consumer crediting, it is one very important area that we can drive using that policy of Mr. President. So, because you will find out, and I want to ask you for anybody that is listening to me can experiment it, that within a year, if you are keeping records of how much you will have used to buy fuel on a daily basis and how much you spent to install renewable energy, within a year, I am sure you will recover that. And you'll find out that most batteries these days have a lifespan of about 10 years. You know, the other thing is that it also helps you to discipline yourself energy-wise. So, which increases the level of efficiency of your energy consumption. Because once you know that you're on a renewable, first you don't just put up on any implement anyhow. You structure the way you consume energy, and all those ones helps you to also save costs and increase the level of efficiency that you get.
So thank you for mentioning your visit to Ayetoro. I follow that, and you were quoted on the Daily Trust to have said Nigerian youths must not only commit themselves to working for the success of the country, but also shun every act destroying the unity and peace of Nigeria. I guess this is a good time to ask you about your own stance on the planned protest.
Well, I think that the stand of Mr. President and the stand of government is very clear.
Okay.
Nigerians are constitutionally guaranteed to protest, to have rallies, to have meetings. Freedom of association is guaranteed under the Constitution. And personally, I am not against it, and government is not against it. However, I think what government is concerned about is that the responsibility of government is to every Nigerian. It is not only to people who want to protest. There are people who are interested in rallying, but there are quite a number of people too who are not interested in rallying. So government has a responsibility to ensure that the rights of those two categories of people is protected. And I think that is why the engagement is ongoing, to ensure that whatever is going to be done, it is done in a manner that does not disrupt peace, that does not disrupt my own freedom or the freedom of another person, that does not cause further economic hardship to the people, that does not cause disorder, unrest, that does not increase the level of insecurity in the country. So those are the concerns of government. And I think that if you look at some of the engagement that has been ongoing, you will see that clearly the government of President Bola Ahmed Tinubu is not against peaceful gathering, peaceful rallying, peaceful meetings. However, we must look at what is being planned. The organizers have said that they want to do their rallies or their protests in 36 states. That is the capital of 36 states, and Abuja, and 774 local governments simultaneously. You know that that requires a lot of logistics to be able to ensure that that happens without any breakdown of law and order. For me, I think that needs to be reviewed so that whatever is going to be done, it is within the ambit of my rights. All your rights ends where my own right begins. Again, I think it's also important for Nigerians, and especially those who are rallying, to understand what the government is trying to do and what is the driving force behind the actions that has been taken by government. For me, I will liken the situation of Nigeria when President Bola Ahmed Tinubu took over in May 29, 2023, to that of a patient suffering from malignant cancer that has spread around every part of the body. Now, when you have such a situation, the first thing to do is a radical surgery. The radical surgery to remove the source of the cancer. And what are the sources of the cancer in this case? For me, I think the two sources of the cancer that needed to be radically addressed was the fuel subsidy and the disparity in the exchange rate. And I think Mr. President came out boldly, courageously, and radically carried out the surgical intervention to remove the source of that cancer. But knowing that that cancer has spread around the body, recovery is not going to be immediate. As a matter of fact, you also need to do chemotherapy to ensure that the areas that the cancer has touched in the body are also rid of the cancer cells. And I think that that is what Nigeria is going through at the moment. I understand perfectly that that is leading to a lot of hardship, a lot of difficulties for the people. But as we know, any cancer patient that is going through chemotherapy will go through a lot of pains. You see loss of hair. You see loss of weight. All are desired for the end product of full recovery from the effect of the cancer. I want to just join to plead for better understanding, more understanding. To me, having worked closely with Mr. President, I can see a president who is very clear in his vision for Nigeria, who is very focused, who knows what ought to be done and is willing to do it, and who is not interested in personal gains, but interested in leaving a legacy of accomplishments, a legacy that will put him in the mold of world leaders that have transformed their countries. I think that is what Mr. President is doing. Yes, the protesting, for me, the protest, as a matter of fact, I would say the protest has been done. There's a lot of protest already in the social media. The level of awareness is high. Government has continuously responded and engaged. And if you ask me, I'll say that the protest is already a success. All right. For me, we don't need to go into the streets again.
Well, thank you for reiterating the fact that this government has repeated that it's not against anyone protesting. And of course, if anyone will protest, should not infringe on the rights of other Nigerians. And on the environment, it's important to know that we are a reflection of what our environment is. Well, we must thank you, Honorable Minister of State, Federal Ministry of Environment, Honorable